If you're a guitar player and you want to play bass, or maybe you're a guitar player and you already play bass, but you want to play better bass, well, this video, it's for you. Alright guys, so I have got 3 very powerful tips for you today for you guitar players who either want to play bass, you want to start playing bass, or maybe you've been playing bass for a little while, but you know, when you lay the bass track down, it's just, I don't know, it's just not sounding like what you hear in music that has a legitimate real bass player laying those bass tracks. So we're going to solve those problems today, and I'm going to help you do that again with these 3 tips. Now, the final tip, we're actually going to hear some different bass tracks. I'm going to show you 2 bass tracks, or let you hear rather 2 bass tracks that they kind of suck a little bit, and I'll tell you why they suck. And then of course the 3rd bass track is the one I'm going to want you to gravitate towards, and of course I'll show you what I'm doing and what to consider when playing that type of track. We'll get there, but first I want to cover the first 2 tips. I want to cover 2 very fundamental and basic bass tips. Yeah, is a pun, and the pun's always intended, you guys know that. The first tip, and this is an extremely optional tip, and it is just purely my opinion, but if you can, if you've got the means to, get a 5-string bass. Now, there's nothing wrong with 4-string basses. There are plenty of excellent bass players in metal and really all genres of music that play a 4-string bass. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but the reason I recommend getting a 5-string bass is you simply have more tonal options. And here's the thing, the bass guitar is really carrying with the drums the foundation of the song. That's what your song is built on. It's kind of like building a house. If you don't have a solid foundation, well, it will crumble, right? It's an old parable. But having the bass, having those extra tonal options, those extra lower notes that you can throw in there from time to time, to me, in my opinion, just kind of strengthens that foundation for the song. And I'm going to share an example where this might come in handy for you. So let's say if you have a riff that you wrote, or a progression that you wrote in the key of B minor. I'm going to play a short clip for you of just something I'm going to make up in that key. And the first time around, you'll hear it with a 4-string bass. I'll pretend that the 5th string doesn't exist on this bass here. Then the second time, I'll play those same notes, but I'll play them on that big B string there. So you can hear that there's a lot more bottom end and just maybe a stronger foundation, as we're talking about for this particular riff, in playing that low B string. Now let me back up for a second. Just because you get a 5-string bass doesn't mean all your notes need to be played in that lowest section possible. You've got other strings, you've got other frets. Use those as well. Again, this B string is just going to give you more options to further fill in some of those spaces in certain riffs and certain types of progressions that you may be writing. And on that note, there might be a little learning curve if you're not used to having that 5th string. Now, if you're playing a 7-string guitar, it's really a no-brainer to get a 5-string bass, because then, you know, those first 5 strings on both instruments are going to perfectly match one another, assuming they're tuned the same. Bass tip number 2, and this, guys, this is just a piece of advice, but it's really important. Don't get hung up on playing with your fingers versus playing with a pick. Listen, there's no right or wrong way. There's only the way that works best for you, and I want you to understand that. See, there's a lot of bass players that play with a pick. They're awesome. There's a lot of amazing bass players that don't play with picks. They play with their fingers or their thumb or whatever they play with. And there's a lot of bass players that also will play a particular method or style that will say the other way is wrong. I'm sorry, it's not wrong. I don't care what anybody says. Again, There's the right way for you, and I want you to focus on what feels more natural to you. This goes for everything. This goes for guitar, if you play drums, if you sing, whatever. You're not trying to sound like someone else or play like someone else, or you shouldn't be anyway. You should only be trying to sound like you. Bring that out, and to do that, you need to pick the method that feels most natural to you. Of course, it needs to sound good. We're going to get to that in the next tip here. I'll give you a short backstory. So again, I think I may have mentioned this. I've been playing bass guitar about as long as I've been playing guitar. Started playing guitar in 1989, the end of 89. And probably a year or two into playing guitar, I started messing around with the bass. And I grew up playing in churches. It was funny. Like I'd be practicing Metallica and Guns N' Roses and Scorpions, all that devil music there at home. And then Sundays I'd be playing in church gospel music. And then after that, throughout the majority of my adult life, I played in I guess what's called contemporary churches that played more like U2-ish style music and more rock music. I'd be playing guitar solos, but I would also often play bass, and this is the reason why I'm telling you this. So I've been playing bass for decades now. Again, I would play bass quite a bit, just filling in if there wasn't a bass player there for that Sunday or whatever. Or sometimes I would just play bass just to play bass. I would just switch instruments. I think that's fun to do. But in any case, I played with my thumb and my fingers throughout those years. I kind of had developed my own technique, but probably I would say about 8 or 10 years ago, I started playing with a pick. And now I play bass primarily with a pick. And I have a very specific pick that I use. I don't know the brand, but it's a really thick pick, and it's probably like a 3, 2.5, 3, something like that. And don't even know what brand this is, again, because it's kind of smeared off there. And I think it's actually, I don't even know. But anyway, it's a very thick pick, and this specific pick, it works really well for me playing bass and for what I do and for what I want the bass lines to sound like, okay? You have to be happy with it at the end of the day. So don't get caught up in someone saying, if you're playing with a pick, someone saying, well, that's the wrong way to play it. What do they know? They're not you. You have to play what's more natural, what feels more natural, and what's more comfortable to you. So just know that. All right, so the third and final tip for you guitar players who want to play bass or play better bass, we're actually just going to dive right into the mixes here. I've got 3 very short clips of music that I want you to hear. So you may have noticed, and this is very common for us guitar players to do, I played exactly the same thing on bass that the guitar was doing. That's not necessarily wrong, but there is a better way, and we'll get to that. But this is kind of a trap that us guitar players fall into often. We've got this really cool riff. It's like, okay, well, that was a cool guitar riff. Let me see if I can play it on bass. Oh yeah, we got to play it on bass. That's not always the best way. Again, it's not wrong, and actually for a lot of your songs, especially if you're playing metal, a lot of times you might be following what the guitar is doing, and that's fine. But again, you don't want to get caught in the trap of that's how you play bass, because that's not how it works. So let's go ahead and listen to the next track. This is track number 2. Now, this is another common method that guitarists will do that want to play bass, but they're just not really comfortable on bass. What we did here was we just played the root notes of the chords that the guitar is playing here. So a lot less movement, and it's just kind of, doom, 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 just, it's kind of boring, to be honest with you. Again, this isn't necessarily wrong. It's not like you're playing the wrong notes or playing out of key. It's just that, well, again, it's boring, and there's a better way, which we're getting to next. Let's listen to this final track. So we weren't playing the exact same thing the guitar was playing, and we weren't just playing those boring root notes to the riff there, okay, to the progression. We were moving around quite a bit, and actually we're playing notes that the guitar was not playing. So what I did here was, first of all, I made sure that the notes that I was playing on bass, I made sure that they were within that key that this part of the song is in, that this little riff and progression is in, okay? Because we need it to sound good. We need it to all kind of mesh together. Now you also, and I know I didn't talk about this earlier, you also want to match the bass with the drums, with what the drums are doing. I'm using a drum program here, but if you're playing with a real drummer, that's when you can really just get in tight sync with one another. That is crucial. That's probably the most important thing about playing bass. You've got to be in sync with the drums. But here, we're just moving around a lot more. We're keeping the song driving, right? We're just making it kind of move a little bit, not faster, but just kind of have more substance to it, if that makes sense. Now, this particular method, what we just did, won't always work in every scenario. It may not work in half the scenarios that you have when you're writing music, but where it can work, if you can find those places where you can do something like this and add those extra notes within that key to really just make the song stand out a little bit more, drive a little bit more, I think this is a good thing to do. It's a really good opportunity to make your song pop, just to make it come alive. Now, as far as the methodology that I used to do what I just did in regards to the notes and all, I've actually got another video, a full like tutorial on how I did that, how I found those notes. That's up here. It's on my other channel that I co-own with Ken Candelas called Metal Mastermind. Be sure to check that out. It's a really cool whiteboard session, and I think you'll get a lot out of that. But yeah, guys, I really hope these bass tips helped you. I hope this helps bring your bass tracks to life, and I hope it helps you kind of take that next step to get to that next level with your bass playing. Now, I know it can be difficult sometimes as a guitar player to kind of switch that mentality from guitar to bass, because again, you know, even though bass is very similar to guitar, there's also a lot of differences as well, and we went over those in this video here. So again, I really hope this video helps kind of bring your music more light, more power, more punch. I hope going through these tips helps you. If so, hey, give this video a thumbs up. Of course, make sure you're subscribed, all that good stuff. But let me know in the comments. I'd love to know if this video helped you, and maybe share some of the challenges that you've had that maybe I didn't cover as a guitarist playing bass and recording your own bass tracks. So guys, thank you so much for watching my video here. Thank you for all the support you guys give me. Until next time, you know what to do. Keep it metal.